Welcome to our ninth podcast of the future of solar photovoltaics. It's with absolute pleasure today we are joined by Mr. Dathan Eldridge, an up to 33,000 volt SAP and HV designated person. For those of you who are not in the industry, it means a senior authorized person with a health or safety responsibility. He can work in high voltage environments, what we call in the cable industry medium voltage. So, a very serious person. Dathan, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, Vikram. Pleasure.
Dathan, you're a man of very few words. You're most of the time working, but today it's all about you. This is your podcast. Tell us a bit about yourself as a person before we talk about work. This is the most popular segment of our podcast, which is people's backgrounds. It seems to be capturing a lot of people's imagination. So if you talk about you as a person, your early life, what can you tell us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I was born on the Isle of Wight in Ryde. My mum's from Ireland. She met my dad on the Isle of Wight when she came over. They decided to move to Southampton when I was one, just because there was better opportunities for me growing up, education and everything like that.
But you said you
Then
moved
I had my brother.
You said in the past. You said in the past you moved to Hampshire in the 80s, right?
Yeah, 1980. Yeah, moved over. Then my brother come along 3 years later. And then we just had a normal childhood. Went to normal schools. I ended up in a all boys school as my last school. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I left school, so I had a few jobs, just doing normal stuff. And I decided to become a chef. So I went to college, studied to become a chef because I always enjoyed working with my hands, being involved. Did that, ended up working in restaurants like TGI Fridays, some main brands. Worked my way up into management in those businesses. I got to a point where I thought I don't want to be doing this when I'm older, because the hours, unsociable hours. I was 20 at the time, so I decided to look at a different aspect of life, and that's when Vestas started a factory on the Isle of Wight and also down in Woolston near where I lived. So I applied for a job there as a technician.
Vestas, but we want to absolutely talk about that. We want to absolutely talk about that. But did you say you went to an all boys school in our previous conversations, and that you were a perfect A grade student?
Yeah, I was a good student. Top sets. I was I was a prefect for a while till I got caught bunking off by the head teacher, and then wasn't allowed to be a prefect anymore. But yeah, I did well at school, got all the grades you need. Just was never really clear of what I wanted to do. Thought about joining the Royal Marines. That didn't go down that avenue. So yeah, I just went to college, become a chef, because it's just something I enjoyed doing, working in that high pressure environment. I had a good social life when you're that young. Was paid pretty good money at the time for my age. Allowed me to get my first car, give me a bit of freedom.
Did you say your dad was an engineer?
Yeah, my dad was an engineer. His dad before him was an engineer. So it's always been in the family. My brother's also an engineer. He's gone on to do that. He works on all the railways. He's in high-level management in the railways. So yeah, I did the chefing for a while. Realised there was no longevity to it, and really thought about what I wanted to do. And like I said, I always enjoyed working with my hands, so I looked at jobs where I could do that. And Vestas was the perfect opportunity for me to move out of the catering industry into an engineering-based renewable energy industry. They were pretty well established as a company.
You enjoy working with your hands, you enjoy problem solving. What about motorbikes and martial arts? Is that something you got involved in school, or was that after?
My dad was actually a black belt in karate. He used to teach students. He used to taught some of the SBS down in Poole as well. He's been doing that since the 70s. So he, again, used to teach me and my brother stuff. Then I looked at doing a bit of Taekwondo, Wing Chun, stuff like that. I've always enjoyed the martial arts, the discipline of it. And obviously, it's pretty cool back then to be able to do that sort of stuff as a kid. And then, I got into motorbikes when I was 20. Bought my first bike. Didn't tell my parents. My dad come over and just saw it parked outside the house. Wasn't too happy. Sort of been into bikes since then, really. It's been a massive part of my life.
What was your first motorbike? How old were you when you got your first bike?
I was 20. I did a direct access course and I bought a Yamaha R6. So it's probably one of the fastest 600s pretty quickly on that.
Was this from your
it's from Sheffin.
career?
From Sheffin, basically. That was my sole transport for a while. Used to ride all weather. Winter wasn't great. But it's become a big passion of mine, riding motorbikes. I still do to this day. Go on annual trips.
And then Vestas is a Danish company. How did you come across Vestas in Hampshire?
So they started a factory on the Isle of Wight producing blades and other components for their turbines. And then they had a smaller facility down in Woolston producing some of the components, some of the moulds and everything. And it just come up, so I applied for it. They wanted people who didn't have a lot of experience so they could train them their way. Which is probably why I got the job, to be honest, because I didn't have any experience at the time. So there's about 40 of us from different aspects, different industries, all joined, and I was there for 3 years till my motorbike accident.
How old were you when you joined Vestas? The motorbike accident is a traumatic thing. We want to talk a bit longer about that. But how old were you when you joined Vestas? You decided you don't want to be a chef anymore. What did you do at Vestas?
So I was a blade technician, and a mould technician. So we were responsible for making all the moulds and the internal components of the blades. The moulds were carbon fibre, just GPR, stuff like that, where we'd build them and then they'd get sent over to the Isle of Wight and they'd make the blades out of the moulds and then we'd go over there to repair them, fix them. They had plumbing systems built into them to heat them up, which is where I got the sort of first taste of plumbing from that point of view. And then we used to build all the internal components that went inside the blades and just learning different aspects of laminating, stuff like that. Bit of engineering, structural engineering. It's a good opening to starting in the renewable energy system industry, really, for a big player.
Fantastic.
Vestas is one of the largest.
I try to picture your early beginnings, Dathan. Try to picture your early beginnings. Yeah. How old were you when you joined Vestas and leading
21?
up to your motorbike issue? Are you able to give us a bit more info? 21, so you're really a young lad.
Yeah.
Your life's just starting.
Yeah, I was 21. 21 when I started there. And I worked there for 3 years. 4 years, actually, because my motorbike accident was in 2005.
So Vestas is a huge company. What made you want to leave them? Why did you not want to progress within Vestas?
I didn't want to leave. I basically had a near fatal motorbike accident in 2005, and the results of that, the injuries I had, the amount of time I was going to be off work, I sort of was made medically redundant because I was basically off work for 3 years recovering. So I couldn't go back to work there, basically, so they obviously couldn't hold my job open either. And they were having some structural changes anyway, so they were changing the team dynamics, and they were having some redundancies at that time, so I took voluntary redundancy while I was recovering. I broke several bones in my leg, my femur, tibia, fibia, done my crucial ligaments in my knee, broke my wrist, my shoulder. I had the fixator frames on for 18 months because I lost 3 inches of bone in my femur. I had one of the top specialists in the UK as a consultant. They actually used my medical records for a case study because it was that severe. So I was lucky to survive, really. I died at the scene and I was revived at the scene. I had 36
You died
hours
at the scene?
Yeah, I died at the scenes from the injuries, so I got revived at the scene. I went straight into the general, Southampton.
Like CPR and all.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And I went straight into the general. I had 36 hours of operations to stabilise me, like right away.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went into a coma for 3 days after that. Stopped breathing. I was on life support for 3 days. My parents were told if I don't start breathing, there's nothing they can do. But luckily I did.
Right.
Yeah, and then I just started the slow progress of recovering and having to learn to walk again, stuff like that. But
And
it gave me a lot of time to think.
Accident, how long were you at Vestas leading up to your motorbike accident? Where you, as you say, you died at the scene. And for me, I'm trained in emergency first aid, but I've never performed CPR.
Okay.
So for me, this is all very frightening.
Yeah.
So what led to your accident? How did you find yourself in that position?
So it was roadworks. It's actually a mile from my house. Wasn't far. I was just going.
Right.
I was going home from work, and I thought I'd just go around and check my bank balance at the cash machine because you didn't have apps or anything back then. And there was a load of roadworks, and I was just going through roadworks, and I got a car turned out in the road, and I clipped this car, and I hit their windscreen, and I went about 50 feet in the air. Witnesses said. And I landed on my right leg, and that took the full impact and just snapped everything, basically. I was fully conscious the whole time till they got me in hospital and I asked to be knocked out, basically, because of the pain. Because my femur, I had a 90-degree bend in my femur, and that straightened my leg out at the scene, which was painful. Yeah, and then I come round probably 4 or 5 days later after that, out of the coma and everything, not realising how bad I'd been. Yeah, and then I had probably another 14 operations after that, and I ended up with those metal frames you have on your legs to extend your bone. I had them top and bottom for 18 months, so every day I'd wake up, I had a little chart where you had to make minor adjustment to the struts with a 10mm spanner, just add a couple of millimeters here and there to, one, keep your legs straight, your bones straight, but also to increase the gaps, so when the bone's growing, the growth continued. And that took 18 months to heal. And then they removed that, and then I spent another year getting better after that. And I finally went back to work in 2008.
Is that when you started your own business?
I went chefing first of all, because it's the easiest job to get. And then while I was chefing, I went back to college. So I was working in the evenings chefing, and I was going to college during the day doing plumbing and electrical. And then I started my own business off the back of that, doing plumbing and electrical work. But while I was at college, I carried on studying, doing unvented heating systems, solar thermal, just a load of renewable energy technologies I could do back then, heat pumps. So I managed to do a hell of a lot of training. And then I knew for me to progress into renewables, I needed to be in a larger company. Otherwise, I'd just be working for myself, just doing the odd install.
Of course, Dathan, you can't just say you died at a motorbike scene and had a near-death experience and then go start talking about plumbing. It's a bit of extremes. Yeah, so your near-death experience, did you see Jesus? What happened?
So I remember it all. I actually wrote a poem about it afterwards, which got published. So I'm actually a published poet as well. I got contacted a few weeks ago by someone
published
who wanted
where?
to put
how do I find? How
just online. It's just
to make sure.
Yeah, it was just published.
It's there.
It's just published online. it's just Dathan Eldridge, my experience of death. Because I remember it all. I remember exactly how it felt. So yeah, I'll just write a poem about it. It's probably one of the ways I had closure dealing with it all, I think, because it does leave you with a lot of questions going through something like that. But it also gave me a massive urge to learn.
Building up to this podcast session, you said that near-death experience in the past made you want to study physics and quantum mechanics. That's a bit of a jump.
Yeah. Well, I had this feel. Yeah, I just had this need to. Strange, really, that I just wanted to learn as much as I could, and I've always had an interest in physics. So I did an A-level physics course through Oxford online. So I started learning about general physics, and I got into quantum mechanics, stuff like that. And I started reading a lot of quantum physics books, Stephen Hawking's, stuff like that, Brief History of Time. So yeah, I started getting into all that, and then I just thought, how can I apply this to my, my actual work life? And that's when I started studying more renewable energy, trying to build a career, which eventually led me to do my engineering degree as well. But I've always had an interest in just learning new skills.
Your engineering degree was after, right? Your engineering degree was later.
Yeah.
Aspire Plumbing and Electrical, you only did that for 2 years and 1 month. Was that business a failure? Was it a success? What happened to it?
It was a success. Yeah, it was a success. No, I just closed it down in the end. I worked for myself doing that. Did renewable energy, heat pumps, stuff like that. I just wanted to get into the larger stuff, and I just knew I couldn't do that working for myself.
Right.
Because it wasn't even a thing.
Right. You don't want to do housing and plumbing. You wanted to do. You don't want to do housing and plumbing. You wanted to get into some massive things. And then what's Pure Green Energy that's written on your LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, so they were a renewable energy company I joined, where I just got into doing solar, thermal, photovoltaics, heat pumps, and I was only there briefly, and then I got contacted by a recruiter for a job at Solar Century.
How did you make a recovery from this massive injury? Are you able to walk around? Do you have any health problems?
Yeah, so
other people similar situation to you, they would want to know, how did you make such a fantastic recovery? What happened?
Well, as soon as I could, I just started training, working out. Had gym equipment in the garage, so I just started working out. I actually rebuilt my motorbike I crashed on into a track day bike while I was off. I just kept myself occupied, so I was studying and just working on my bike, weight training. Like I was going for regular physio. Yeah, and I've got no cartilage in my right knee. My right leg's a little shorter because the bone didn't grow as much as they wanted to. But other than that, don't really have any issues that affect me. Probably
do you have screws in your knees? Because I have a lot of football mates and a lot of people that work out on the road. They've got issues with knees, and they can't bend their knee, straighten their knee after they've been driving. Do you have problems like that, or you're completely fine?
I'm fine, but I've got titanium plates, screws. When I was in hospital, I was going for an MRI, and I had 2 consultants discussing whether the screws and plates would be an issue. And they had magnets, and they were sticking magnets on my framework and stuff, and one said it was fine, the other one wasn't too sure, so it was a 50-50 chance of me having stuff pulled out of my leg when I went in this big machine, but it turned out okay in the end. But yeah, I've got titanium plates. I haven't got any rods, but I've got a broken screw in my femur where they played it. It didn't work, which is why I ended up with a frame. But yeah, I'll probably need a knee replacement when I'm older, they said. But at the moment, I was too young to have that done. But it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect my work life. I still work 50, 60 hours a week. Yeah, on site.
You're fine. Obviously, I've seen you around sites and places, and you get about a bit in terms of traveling. I calculated in 2005 accident during your Vestas departure, you may have been about 25, 26 years old. So you're still a young lad, and then you seem quite keen to talk about your interviews with solar technologies, which became British Gas Solar, now Centrica and Solar Century. What happened with these interviews?
Yes.
Why did you join Solar Century and not British Gas?
So for me, British Gas, I was offered a job, same sort of role, just their installation team, and then I had the same with South Century. But for me, South Century felt more like a business I could be involved in, where British Gas at the time I just felt more like I'll just disappear into the ether, I'll just be an employee number. So I just had the choice to choose a better company I thought would suit my career needs, which was South Century. And I went for the interview. During that interview, there was a guy called Dave Bailey who was going to head up the commercial teams. His role was available, and they said I'd be better suited for the technical role on all the commissioning side and the O&M, EPC stuff than just being an installation engineer because of my background and the training I've done and the education I've done to that point, basically. So I started
that's 2010, right? Well, that's 2010.
Yeah, 2000,
5 years after your accident, you started with Solar Century.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, just late 2009. Yeah, joined South Century.
And then the bridge. This was the time they were working on a very famous bridge, Blackfriars Bridge, I believe.
Yeah, so when I started there, they were still doing like large residential projects, some commercial stuff. Obviously, they did Cambridge, the 5 megawatt solar farm there. Blackfriars was a couple of years after I joined. I was involved in that, just on the commissioning and working on the, help with the EPC stuff and then the O&M after that. So yeah, I was lucky to get involved in some of the larger projects they were doing because they were sort of quite ahead in the marketplace, South Century at the time. So they had some really good stuff I could get my teeth into really and expand my knowledge, and that's where a lot of the manufacturing training come in. Getting exposure to that, learning all new technologies, and and then I just carried on learning myself, learning more about the physics, the background, the technologies, what the additional courses I could do. Because I've always said to people in the industry who want to advance themselves, don't wait for a company to train you, because they often only do it if it's a financial benefit to the business. So you can spend years somewhere and just not really gain much knowledge or experience unless you push yourself really.
Absolutely. So 2010 and until 2016, so about 6 years. You joined Solar Century 2 years before I started visiting them as on behalf of Leone, which is a student now. And so you spent 6 years and 4 months as a commissioning engineer and a field service engineer and an asset manager. You say on your LinkedIn, you spent some time obviously on the Blackfriars Bridge, which was very prestigious at the time, but also Bentley and some of the large solar farms. What were you seeing? Because during that time, quality was more of a focus because everything was new, and we spent a lot of time with Guy Atherton and other people, really meticulously looking at details. You were coming in towards the back end of the project. What was your impression of what you used to see then on sites during the commissioning?
The build quality was always good. There was always that blend of the electrical regulations, making sure everything adhered to that, being private networks. And then obviously the technologies and component selection, because it was sort of fairly new back then. You didn't really know how certain aspects or components would stand over time to where we do now. Certain things you just wouldn't install because it's not going to last. They were always up against crazy deadlines, because of the feed-in tariffs and everything back then. They didn't get a site generated by a certain date, they'd end up with massive fines, so there was always massive pressure, even on the commercial side. So it was always pretty hectic. The sites were obviously terrible with mud and working conditions. So yeah, we were brought in to QA, obviously commission everything, get everything online working, get the site generating so they could basically hit their deadlines. And they would feed back to the engineering team. Obviously, it'd be under O&M at that point as well. There wasn't really O&M back then like it is now. Contractually, there's all these tasks you have to do every year annually. That wasn't the case back then. It was more keep the asset running as best as you could, fix anything that needed fixing, do the maintenance that was required, and just reactive more than planned back then. So that the O&M sort of aspect developed over the years to fall in line with more contractual stuff, I think, rather than just building these sites and fixing them as they went to the client took them over, basically.
You say on your LinkedIn profile during this hectic 6 years from 2010 till 2016 that you've commissioned over 1,000 systems, domestic, commercial, and large scale. What proportion of that is large scale?
It's probably a big part of it, to be honest, because the solar century sort of pushed into that era. They still did a bit of residential, they still did a bit of commercial, but it was mainly ground mounts. Some of the larger stuff, 50 megawatt sites, and then it obviously moved into Europe. So there's some sites over there we went and did QA and TA on, commissioning. So yeah, it's probably about 60% ground mount, I'd say. Probably 10% residential,
right. So
and the rest
quite
commercial.
a high number.
Yeah,
I can very well buy into that because that was my busiest sales year in the last decade or so. Anyway, between 2012 and 2016, so that was the first UK boom. We seem to be moving towards another one. But in the meantime, you did some O&M engineering. What does that mean, O&M engineering for Solar Century?
So obviously, all this equipment has manufacturers' recommendations for maintenance. So that's your first port of call. You do your general maintenance, but then as these sites age, they start developing issues due to technologies, equipment selection, sometimes even down to the physical materials that the equipment was made from, especially PV modules. So there's a big learning curve of all the issues that could come with an aging site, from inverters degrading, communication issues causing shutdowns, fan failures, moisture from subs flooding, modules having PID, like potential induced degradation, which can seriously impact the performance of a module. Cracked cells from installation because people didn't really understand back then you couldn't walk on the modules or handle them too roughly, because that sort of grew from the early days to when they were starting getting like, why these sites not performing the way they should be, they're not doing what they're designed to do. So the whole aspect of that sort of led into once again I started studying a lot in my own time about modules and the materials, PID and other stuff that can affect the module's performance, other stuff that can affect inverter's performance, transformers, harmonics, and everything like that. And then from that grew, from our technical experience, we started developing aspects of techniques and procedures and sort of testing we could go and do on a site to establish what was wrong with it. And then from that point, we'd be able to start tackling the liquidated damages the business was receiving for underperformance, which was quite high at the time. And some sites we managed to reduce it quite significantly.
Absolutely,
yeah, so
Dathan. One of the positive things about this podcast is, we want everyone to learn and participate and go towards a positive direction and avoid anything that might be confidential, but at the same time we don't want to learn lessons from the past. And what I've learned here in myself is, whenever you would go to a Solar Century site, it'd be one of the cleanest sites you'll come across, despite the equipment. Good quality, bad quality, average quality. you'll have nice roads to drive on, you'll have a clean environment to work in, and in between
Yeah,
we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've had a lot of changes in the market. And I can be honest with you, sites I go to now, they're completely a pile of words we can't use. There's no road, and
yeah.
the road sinks, and everything's flooded. You could ruin your exhaust. Vans get stuck. What made Soul Century so good in terms of the civils that they could set up these sites so professionally, and you could work on it like it's a park?
They had good contractors who grew as Soul Century grew. So from the early day, I mean, Aaron Construction sort of built some of the really early sites for Soul Century, and so they were consistently using the same contractors. So everyone was learning as the years went by what worked, what didn't work, getting better at their jobs basically. And the projects just got larger. So yeah, I think it's just down to using consistently good contractors. Obviously, design aspects, they knew what didn't work and what did, so they'd implement changes every design to improve the sites. I always selected the top tier equipment, inverters that had good manufacturer support, the top tier modules, framework. Again, where we just get the support from the manufacturer, go and do specific training for looking after the equipment, because they often didn't have people in the UK, and it was financially viable for us to be doing it instead of them. So we've become a service partner for some of these main manufacturers. So we've grown our knowledge on that side as well as just the actual EPC side and the build side. So we'd have a really good, clear image of how to look after these sites. And we'd relay back to the engineering team from an O&M point of view as well, like how to improve it so it's easier to look after during O&M. What equipment would last, what wouldn't, stuff that was taking a lot more maintenance than should do because of equipment selection. So there's just feedback and reviewing everything that had been done previously and just using consistently good contractors, basically.
Dathan, you say consistently good contractors. Aaron, unfortunately, are gone. But
Yeah.
what do you exactly mean by good contractors, and how do we get into that situation now? Because there are not enough contractors about.
So it was, one, knowledgeable, two, presence. They always had senior management on site, good project managers. They were never project managed from an office.
Right. So that's a big thing now because everyone's working remotely, so
Yeah,
it's hard to do that now. Yeah.
Good supervisors. Obviously, everyone uses agency, so even down to agency guys, having decent agency guys and managing them properly. But yeah, it was mainly down to their management, really. Kevin and Phil. Yeah, Kevin and Phil being on site all the time, overseeing and working out in the field as well, not just sat in an office.
I hazard a guess,
yeah.
Kevin and Phil, you mean as in Aaron, right? Kevin Kiley and Phil Deadman, right?
Yeah. Yeah, great guys. Always there, and cared what they did. They really cared. That's another massive factor. You've got to take some pride in what you do. Yeah, and so Century supported them as well. They sort of worked hand in hand, really. They sort of supported each other, and their businesses both grew because of it.
Dathan, entire high streets have been shut down by the COVID, and the solar industry is no different. A lot of businesses have changed or gone under or stopped doing solar themselves. You're such a senior person within Solar Century. I rarely came across you at that time because you were on the commissioning and O&M side of things. I was more on the pre-construction side. Well, I found later that how vital you were to the business, and you were working more hours than you had in a successful business. What made you want to leave and start your own business? At what point did you drive around in your vehicle and thought, I want to leave Soul Century? Why would you even think that?
So, for me, the way O&M's done generally as a business, I don't think it's very successful packaging everything together. So I did write a new business plan model for O&M at Soul Century. which they did sort of implement a bit. But they also had, they were looking at selling the business at the time, so they had a sort of shift in what they wanted to do with the business. So O&M wasn't really something they wanted to grow. It was more of a necessity that had to be done because of the EPC side of the projects needed a 2-year warranty O&M.
Yeah.
So after
it's still like that. It's still like that because there's a game between the fund and the EPC, and the fund often is a small company and they don't want to take on the O&M because they're scared, because there's so much responsibility. At the same time, these projects are built very fast, so there's always issues. So Century had far fewer issues than many other people, but it was a game where you are always in fight with EPC, O&M, and the fund, which wasn't nice. And unfortunately, some of it seems to be going on now. But what did you think? So you thought you're getting squeezed in O&M, I'm going to start my own business. Was it as simple as that, or was it a bit more detailed?
That was as simple as that, really. We just thought, we could take our knowledge. We're sort of a company within Solar Century, the O&M team, a business within a business. So we thought we could just do it for ourselves, basically. Take our knowledge, our experience. I left Solar Century, I think it was a Wednesday. I was on site Thursday working for myself. There's literally no in between. I was left one day, I was working for myself the next day. We originally just carried on being field service support engineers, doing O&M tasks, inverter maintenance, stuff like that, because of our backgrounds. And then the business rapidly grew into where it is today, as sort of like an EPC specialist, where we can support all the O&Ms with everything they need to do. We can do all the repairing, revamping, quite a lot of high voltage works. We also do EV chargers, a lot of commercial, and we still do electrical contracting. We rewired a gym not so long ago in London. So we've always just kept. I didn't want to I always wanted a business where we'd be open to anything, really, and just see where it took us. And just used our knowledge and experience.
You're very humble. Dathan, you're very humble. You undersell yourself a lot of times, and I've noticed in the last few years I've known you. There's a term in the industry called Solar Centurion. If you worked at Solar Century and had some involvement, you're a Solar Centurion. Some people work for 2 months and they're a Solar Centurion. You work there for a decade, What's your reflections on a decade of your life you've given up? How old were you when you left Solar Century? 35 or more? And you seem a bit silent about the whole thing. What's without getting into anything negative, anything weirdly legal, from you join almost as a apprentice, you get all of these qualifications, you do more megawatts than most people have ever built in their lives in terms of commissioning and O&M. What's your reflections about the whole 10 years of experience, the 10 years of life you've given up? Because with your accident, you said you've got your outlook on life. What's your outlook on Solar Century?
For me, they always had that vibe of being like a kind of Apple, Google. They're predominantly, a lot of the founding members, they really care about the environment. That's always been their major push. And it was nice to work in a company that wasn't just purely financially driven. They were trying to solve a problem, tackle climate change, but also had a lot of opportunity to learn and to try new things. I worked with some amazing people. One of the guys I worked with, George, he was in his 60s when I started, but he had such a career previous where he commissioned nuclear submarines. He worked on every aspect of electrical engineering, and just having those few years with him, getting his knowledge passed down to me, was invaluable. Learned a lot on the communication sides with him. So I just had the opportunity to work with some really good people, to learn a lot. And I've got a lot of chances to work on a lot of stuff that you don't normally get to work on. And that also went into Europe doing stuff, Africa. If we thought we could do something, they'd let us have a go, basically. If we could solve a problem, they'd let us try and fix it. instead of just subbing it out, which we often did. It really annoys me when I can't fix something.
Yeah, I loved working with Solar Century people because we would come with ideas and say, this is what we want to try. We've got a new idea for a bus bar solution or a new idea for batteries or microgrid. And you're right, they would have a 30 megawatt or 50 megawatt project, and they'll say, let's dedicate a small part of it for the R&D. We would actually not just get talk, we'll get orders. We'll get orders coming in from various different people. Some of them quite junior, but they're issuing massive orders because they hired really well trained, really enthusiastic people. I won't mention names just to keep people, happy. But you will get really young people who are very, very clever. The assistant project manager, they'll send you an order for 30 grand. Go do a prototype. So I know what you mean. You would always be trying new things. And in the end, we found in, Southwark, we could save £1 million on going to aluminium cables, and that came about just as a bit of fun R&D that we had agreed with Solar Century.
Yeah, exactly, and just being able to influence O&M to a point where you could have a big impact on budgets. I was in charge of the liquidated damages for a while at Solar Century, reducing that. So I did a lot on warranty claims with module manufacturers with all PID. Did a lot of research development on that, a lot of drone development, thermal surveys, infrared cameras, just developing skills and techniques and testing with Ivy curve testers to get a successful warranty claim with these manufacturers, because they try anything not to give you a warranty claim. And even down to
I understand it's essential sometimes, but it's not a nice thing to do claims on liquid damage or warranties. It gets very negative and nasty very quickly. Did you fly any drones yourself? I know people, I won't mention their names. Some people have been in hot water for crashing 20 grand drones. Did you get involved with stuff like that yourself?
I didn't fly any. No, I didn't fly any. I just worked on the process of taking that information and using it in the field. Because we used the drone company. They gave us a load of data, and then I found I was spending 3 days out in the field just trying to find the information they provided, the modules. It wasn't accurate enough, so I worked a lot with a company at a time to develop a system where you could just hand it to a field engineer and they could go straight to the issue and fix it or sort it out, get the information you needed. Working on algorithms, software development, and using the luminescence testing at night to find the difference between PID and some other issue the module's having, because you get a lot of inverter clipping on some of the larger sites because the way they've been designed, and it can be misinterpreted as an issue with the module's PID because it gives a similar thermal pattern on the camera. So it's understanding the way a solar farm works as well, and interpreting that data and just knowing that's not a physical issue with the modules, it's just a design aspect of the site, because it's the inverters are oversized to their output because of the lifetime of the project, needing to still generate 10 megawatts in 20 years. So it's having all that information and understanding, because once you mention PID to a client, it's sort of going to have big implications, because it's sort of your modules are dying basically. It's reversible.
What is PID, potential induced degradation? How do you get potential induced degradation? What do you mean by potential? Is it voltage?
Yeah, so basically you have the electrons not flowing the regular paths. It's down to material selection sometimes. Could be down to grounding. So the electrons flow out of the cells into the framework, into the ground basically, and the module becomes dead. You can negatively ground a site to negate that to a point, but then you introduce loads of other health and safety issues because you can't pick up string faults. So you might have string faults you're unaware of, which can cause fires or electrical safety hazards. every module will get PID at some point. It's just natural. It's just the ones that aren't manufactured to the best performance with the best material selection choice tend to have a greater risk of getting PID sooner than others. It's only certain manufacturers have seen as well. I haven't seen it on. So
this is a big thing because anything to do with modules, huge, because a lot of people don't realize how big solar farms are. You can have solar farms that are 1,000 acres, and a lot of it can be taken up by modules, and it looks simple, but then you walk and you walk and you walk, and it's repetitive, huge bits of equipment. And PID is a big thing. I know that myself from previous experiences. If I try to summarize it, so the cells don't, so the electrons don't flow. You got photons from light turned into electrons. They don't flow through the solar cells like you have in a calculator, like you have in solar panels. They don't flow down the intended bus bars. You start to have leakage to ground as in earthing. So the electrons start flowing into the earth instead of through the bus bars. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, they migrate out through the framework, and then you essentially just get dead cells. They just stop working. So it looks luminescence testing. It looks like an X-ray. So you'll see a module with just loads of dark cells where they're just not running, basically. And it generally starts at the negative end of the string, and it sort of works its way up the modules. So the first module is always the worst, and over time it just gets worse and worse because of the way the sites have, strung and everything like that, and just the way it physically works. You can reverse it by putting reverse current in at night. Some new inverters do that at night anyway to mitigate this problem. We install some anti-PID systems on some older sites to reverse it, but you'll never get rid of it. And every module will eventually suffer it to some extent as they degrade.
Is it a safety hazard? Is it a health and safety hazard to have electricity leaking from your modules through the glass?
No, not really. It's just a performance. You can lose 30% of your site, basically performance-wise. It just pulls down your performance of your string, basically your output. So you might have an underperforming site, but you've got no insulation faults or anything like that. But you could have an issue like that, which is completely, you can't see it through the naked eye. You have to have a thermal camera, drone surveys to pick this up, basically.
And when you have a dead cell, you got bypass diodes, right? So the module can still keep working apart from the cell that's died with its electrons leaking to Earth. So the module still is functional. You might have a 60 cell or 72 cell module. You might lose a couple of cells. That's what you mean, right?
You're testing. You have like 20 volts on the module instead of 38, because every cell is generally 0.6 of a volt. But where you've lost a lot of it, so your voltages are down on your strings, that's where your performance losses come from, basically. And then they drag down.
And how does negatively grounding? How does negatively grounding stop PID? That's really fascinating for me.
Because it's a floating system generally. I'd have to look it up now.
I think a lot of people don't know. These are things we can research and follow up later on. But on negative grounding, it's an interesting area. And floating means it's not grounded at all, which makes you feel a bit scared from a safety point of view. Why is negatively grounding dangerous from your perspective? What is the risk? We don't need to understand all the science, all the boffinry. Even the boffins don't understand it, to be honest. But we need to just appreciate what we're dealing with. That's all we need to do.
So negatively grounded sites, you get high leakage current on Earth. So I've seen on some central sites up to 7 amps on an Earth just through leakage. Can't be avoided.
Right.
It's just, so you have an aspect of safety from that point of view. But because you've got it negatively grounded, you then can't pick up individual string faults. because the whole thing's grounded, so you can't see if a string's gone down to earth as well, because it's being masked by the grounding. So you lose all your individual string monitoring, which again, you can have strings out which you won't know about unless you physically go and check, instead of the monitoring telling you you've lost 2 strings in the combiner box. And there's also a fire aspect as well. So it has...
But these are things that are going to take weeks and weeks to solve. We need to go to follow up more. Yeah, but please finish. It has a lot. I lost your connection for a second there.
Yeah, so you might reduce the impact PID has on your modules or getting PID, but you've introduced a whole another realm of issues to do with earthing and string leakage, string monitoring. So you can have strings out that you're not even aware
of.
Corrosion.
What about galvanic corrosion?
Yeah.
What about corrosion
you
of
also
dissimilar metals?
Yeah, you also increase the risk of that through galvanic action, which is a big problem on sites. People using the wrong washer, and the bolts rust. It's little things like that.
Right.
That's not just the UK. I've seen that in many different countries. It's sort of an industry flaw, I think. Just picking the wrong dissimilar materials, not understanding, selecting the wrong washer can have that much impact, especially on a ground mount, because it's just replicated across the whole site.
Yeah, because you've got steel framework, you've got copper, hard-drawn copper or copper earthing or aluminium cabling, and you've got 2 different metals connected. Then you've got 7 amps, as you say, flowing out. If providing the string cables are not broken, you can have 7 amps flowing out of PID or whatever. That things we don't really understand, but we know it's happening. And then so you got current flowing through 2 different metals. You basically made a battery that can, corrode 33 kilograms of steel or 8 kilograms of lead. I don't know the numbers exactly, but it's a big thing in the transmission industry where they have to put in sacrificial anodes or cathodes because you don't want pylons collapsing or railway tunnels collapsing because of galvanic action. So it's a very, very important thing. But what about the hard-drawn copper, the bare copper that you bury in the soil? Do you have any experience of that? Is there a risk of the earth corroding? Isn't the structure already providing an earth in some description?
It is, but it's not under the same potential, which is why they bond everything. Because you can touch one table and you can touch another, but they might have different potentials. So that's why they have to bond it. It's just about electrical safety from that point of view. That's part of the regulations as well.
Right, there's experts in earthing. That is a heavy area in itself. But now let's talk about DES. You start DES, Dynamic Energy Solutions. You leave under a tumultuous time. It's essentially you're such a key person. So are your colleagues who are working at O&M, such as Mr. Liam Hicks. You have these visions of starting your own company. When you said the first day you were allowed, you were working in your own business on site. It's been about over 4 years now. So tell us about your business. It's Dynamic Energy Solutions. Just to make sure I'm saying it right.
Yeah.
What is your business? What were your first visions? And where do you stand from them now, 4 years later?
So when we left, we just saw ourselves as support services for the industry, using our inverter manufacturer training, our specialist knowledge, just to fill the gaps, because a lot of companies, they either don't have the capacity to have people skilled in their team because of the cost, or they just don't have the manpower as well to do a lot of the O&M or reactive maintenance tasks that are required. So we filled that gap initially, just supporting the larger O&Ms with just normal O&M work, inverter manufacturer repairs, maintenance, and then high voltage stuff, swapping transformers, switch gear, HV maintenance. We started that aspect, and then we started hiring people, building the internal management team bigger, growing what the company could do. So we moved in commercial, solar, commercial EV, grew the services we were already providing more into an EPC aspect. So moving into repair and revamping, and then taking on full EPC work as well, and just building our knowledge further with more employees, more key personnel in the office to deliver larger works. And we've had rapid growth because of it, because it's just such a need for it in the industry at the moment. So even though we left during when COVID happened, it didn't really affect us, to be honest, as a business. We've been doubling or tripling in size every year financially as a business. Team's been growing.
Absolutely, you guys are very entrepreneurial, very hardworking, too hardworking if you ask me, and make time for yourself as well. But you use social media very effectively because it was hard to ignore what you guys were doing. I would delete LinkedIn and install it back to see what your next day's posts were, and here we are. We have these funds going through their own issues because they need to return money back to shareholders, and they've had exploding transformers. Again, let's not get into anything confidential. And next minute, everyone's moaning about what's going on and getting their lawyers involved. And then we see a post from Dynamic Energy Solutions or Des from you with motorbikes. Considering a motorbike accident, I'm a bit shocked. You still have motorbikes, and suddenly you have these transformers being craned into place, and everything's fine. So one minute you're installing a domestic EV charger, next minute you're lowering these massive transformers, and the demand for your services grows and grows and grows because you guys are very ballsy and you go and get the job done. So when you say repowering, and a lot of people say repowering, someone might have a desktop on paint and say they repower because they draw some solar cells, but you guys are actually repowering high voltage equipment. So this is what I mean when I say you undersell yourselves. So how did this happen? When you left Solar Century, did people start panicking and start calling you to change blown up transformers? What happened exactly? Don't mention any sites, any names, but tell us how are you solving these kind of problems? How can you just go on site and replace a burning building into a brand new transformer?
So we obviously had a lot of contacts when we left. People knew us anyway because we'd been in the industry for quite a long time. And we've always tried to react as fast as we can. If there's an issue, we at least try to get there either same day or next day. And then we just formulate a plan to fix the issue. I think a lot of our experience on a lot of these sites where we've been involved in the build or O&M, so we knew these sites pretty well anyway. So it's just sort of made it easy for us to be able to go in and fix a problem or find a solution to solve the issue.
Absolutely, believe it or not, Dathan. Believe it or not, there were companies have gone bust. Sites have changed hands 5 or 6 times, but some of the early sites we worked on are more than 10 years old now. Because we've been so busy, we haven't even noticed the time pass by. These are very confidential things. 10 years ago, now they're 10-year-old sites belonging to some random fund. But this is where experience really matters, because you know these sites, right? You know these sites. You know the equipment manufacturers. You know who built them. So when completely random new people come in and panicking, at least when they go to you, they could get a 10-year encyclopedia on certain sites.
Yeah, and it's just having that experience with the older equipment, the older comms, because integrating new equipment with old is sometimes tricky, especially on the comms side. So just having a real good core foundation understanding of how these sites were built, because a lot of the manufacturers aren't around anymore, so you just don't have the technical support. But we have that knowledge. We were service partners for a lot of the major companies, still are now, taking on new service partnerships with the key players today. We're familiar with a lot of the old switchgear, transformers, a lot of the problems they had. So we just applied that knowledge and just built our own client base. And we've been successful at doing that because we tried doing it, obviously, as fast as we can, but to the best of our ability and delivering and getting everything back online as quickly as possible, really. And but to a high standard as well, which is why I think repowering's been very good for us. We always do it with understanding of these sites need to be looked after. They're going to be around another 10, 20 years. The contracts are going to extend it, so they're going to be around probably even longer than that. So when it comes to doing a repowering, revamping, design and everything, we think about all aspects, not just how quickly can we do this, what equipment can we shove in there, is it going to make O&M life difficult, is it going to increase costs down the line for the client. So we look at the whole picture really, as well as delivering it on time, on budget, to a high standard. And it's going to be a massive industry, like you said, because it's so many old sites. Basically.
Absolutely, and you're working for some large funds. Let's not get into any legals, etc. But how do you convince such big companies to go with you for repowering? And tell us what is repowering and what is revamping? What do you understand it as the difference between the two?
So revamping is where you're just improving a site, changing some components to generally make it safer or just increase your performance just by changing the modules, maybe. Could be a sign of revamping. Repowering is when you're basically almost taking it back to the framework, and you're doing everything from that, maybe new modules, new inverters, and that involves all the restring of the site, all the main DCs, new ACs. So it's practically like a build almost. Bit more complex because you're dealing with the cables and everything that are already in the grounds. You're walking into a site that's 10 years old and might have massive health and safety issues. It's had fires. Half the site doesn't run. There's a lot of cable faults. The communications sketchy, doesn't work. Because often when you repower, you don't change the comms. You just you use what's there. You just use different cores in the cable. But if that cable's been faulty, you often find that you have problems at the end where you're going around fault finding, trying to fix comms issues to get the site on, communicating. So it's dealing with all those. So there's a blend of our O&M experience and EPC knowledge where we can go in and just do it, but we can also deal with any problems that crop up. We also do substation fires. We replace complete subs. We take out non-supported inverter manufacturers and put in a new one that's supported, and then it's just, again, marrying up an old site with the new equipment, taking into account all the new regulations, G99, G100, stuff like that. So it's understanding the bigger picture. But also you've got to be careful because you might put an inverter in that can produce way more than the original. So then you've got to look at curtailing that inverter, how to set that up so you don't go over the original export agreement. So it's a bit more in depth than just an EPC project. And I think that's why we enjoy doing them. It's a bit more challenging. We get to use our experience and knowledge a lot more.
Absolutely,
and
we're doing this podcast now, and because you're so busy with doing it remotely, I prefer to do face to face with you if I can in the future.
Yeah.
But we have to remember we're not retired from the industry. We are still very much in the deep end, in the mud, doing things. I'm almost working 7 days now with my kids' sports and work even on the weekends because, to be honest, I am a solar geek and I like electrical engineering myself, and I've been doing it for 20 plus years, and I enjoy it. That's why I don't take breaks sometimes, because if someone gives me something that I find fun, I'll work the weekend if I have to. So you are doing the same right now, but we have to take time aside. But there's some things I want to mention, like PID we need to come back to in the future, negative grounding we need to come back in the future, repowering inverters we need to come back in the future, substations we need to come back in the future, because your work is so often we need to sometimes sit back and take stock. But I'm a bit conscious as well about the signal quality as well. And what I want to ask you as we try to wrap this up for this evening, you've had 4.5 years with 4 years and 3 months with Des. You are still busy. I'm doing projects with you right now. In fact, we've done repowered one. You did some other stuff yourself. I've got things to do for you tonight and tomorrow morning, which I'm conscious of. I need to save energy for. but let's not get our studies and our nerdiness distract from our social skills on the bigger picture, which is you are in business for 4 years plus, you are a success, you have to look after your health as we all do. What is the future for Des? If you're talking to your future self, your listeners, your customers, your former colleagues, how do you see what you've done now evolving into the future business that's dynamic energy solutions? If you want to talk a bit about that before I wish you a good Sunday evening.
Yeah, so we're just going to expand on what we're doing, really. I want to grow the commercial team so we can deliver more commercial projects. I want to grow the EPC team so we can take on larger projects. I mean, right now we're doing substation replacement, switchgear replacement. We have a build. We've just finishing a repowering project. We've got a couple of rooftops we're doing. We're doing an airport. So we're doing a lot. I just want to be able to make them more of their own section within the business instead of the team doing everything. I'd have specific teams to do certain aspects. And obviously repowering and revamping is going to be a massive sector. And then obviously we've got other things going on in the background where we're just scaling up the business from management side, money sides with investment. There's something else we're starting, which is going to feed into what we're doing. So Des will be a supporting company to this new business, which I can't really talk about, but that will come out at some point down the road. So it's been quite a roller coaster. It's been rapid growth. And I'll just see it getting busier because there's so much happening, so many builds. These sites are getting older. So and we'll just end up supporting the industry like we've been trying to do from day one, really, just on a bigger scale. And maybe build some of our own projects one day. We're own, basically.
Absolutely, really fantastic. I just want to say, you do really undersell yourself. You have to take care of your health a bit more. Be careful with the motorbikes. Because you are straightforward. Your business partners are straightforward. They get down to the business and get the work done. And that's what inspires a lot of people in an environment where people play politics, talk a lot of nonsense. You go and get the job done. You don't shout about it so much. You're very active on social media, but it's more to do with the industry stuff. You're not all the time saying me, me, me. You're actually doing stuff, and actions speak louder than words. And you can see that in very, very senior people joining you and other people wanting to work with you. So I want to say congratulations for what you've achieved so far. And you've got your daughter to pick up soon, and we've got work to do together in the morning. But I've certainly enjoyed this conversation, and I will listen back. And I'm a bit scared that did it record properly. I hope it did. I will send you a copy, and you can have a look. And I think most of what we want to talk about, we're not allowed to talk about. So,
yeah, exactly.
Any final thoughts for your listeners as we get on with our plans?
I'd just like to say your company's only as good as your team behind you. Really, I've had some fantastic people like Brett Baber working for me. He played a massive part in building the business. Obviously moved on to Bay Electric, but we're still in contact, working with each other. I've got a great management team, great guys in the field, and you can't do this on your own. So we treat everyone the way we want to be treated. Coming from the tools helps, I think. We won't do anything we're not prepared. We're asked people to do something, but if we're prepared to do it ourselves, we wouldn't get people doing something that we wouldn't do. And we treat people fairly, and I think that shows, and that's why people want to work with us and work for us. I think, like you said, just being
fantastic.
Humble.
And Dathan, I've been edge of my seat most of this just to make sure we don't slip anything that we're not supposed to, and we haven't so far. And we've got hundreds of burning questions to ask you, and we're in at 1 hour and 11 minutes. I know you need to pick your daughter up in about 4 minutes, so thank you very much for joining this podcast. I will listen back several times to think deeply about the things you've said, and I will have follow-up questions. So
Yeah.
thanks very much, Dathan.
No, thank you. It's been great. Thanks for the opportunity.